Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Mate. He is Ricardo Martinez-Paz. We are talking Steelers. We are talking Eagles. Tough times for both of these teams, man. The Eagles, getting blown out by two of their biggest rivals in back-to-back weeks. The Steelers losing to two bottom feeder teams the last 2 weeks. So has not been ideal, hasn't been great, but we're still going to be here breaking it down and looking ahead to Week 15 and the rest of the season. But before we do that, Ricardo, I ask, how are you?
Doing all right, man. I mean, things could be better for our teams, but it's just for the Eagles at least, just the kind of getting to the tail end of the brutal schedule. But overall, outside of football, I'd say pretty good. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. I just had finals, so this week has been, pretty hectic for me, but I'm happy we can hop on here for, 45 minutes to an hour and talk about these two teams. But yeah, man, outside of the Steelers and Eagles and, their struggles, everything's going pretty good. I mean, I did some of my Christmas shopping earlier today, which I've been putting off. So that was good to get some of those gifts ordered. All of a sudden it kind of snuck up on me. Are you early with the Christmas? You're definitely an early Christmas gift getter.
This year I'm actually not. I'm actually kind of procrastinating, but typically I am an early.
Yeah, I was gonna say you strike me as the type of guy that would have it done, but I mean, yeah, life just gets in the way sometimes, and sometimes, it just becomes a last minute thing. So, so be it. So be it. All right, sounds good, man. Let's jump into talking about these teams a little bit. I mean, which one do we want to start with here, man? There's not a lot of good that we can jump in with.
Let's start with the Steelers and then go because they played first. So I guess
okay,
it's been a while.
They did play first, dude. It does feel like it's been a while, dude, because it was a Thursday night football game against the Patriots. So they've really had a lot of time to let that loss kind of marinate, and it's a tough spot, man, to lose to the Cardinals, who had 2 wins going into their matchup against the Steelers at home. Then to try in a game against the Pats the following Thursday that Mike Tomlin said going into this game, this is like a, bounce back game, and he kind of said something along the lines of like, we need to kind of get right and like get ourselves right and whatnot. And they go and they hand the Patriots their first win of the season outside of the AFC East division. So that's what happened in that matchup. And Mike Tomlin, was asked after this loss, how are the Steelers going to bounce back from this? And he very frankly just said, this is who we are. And honestly, it's hard to really put up an argument with that at this point. It's like they're still a playoff team. They still have an opportunity to, scratch their way into being a 7 or a 6 seed in this season. But, it's like the mindset just doesn't seem there. The fact to go from, having arguably their best offensive game against the Bengals 3 weeks ago, and then to just lay 2 complete eggs these past 2 weeks. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick said it really well, I thought, after this game. Talking about the team and certain guys on the team, he just said they just want to walk out here and think they're going to make plays because they're wearing the black and gold. And, this is the Steelers are the first team over 500 to lose back-to-back games to teams 8+ games into the season under 500. So I know that's a mouthful there, but any way you slice it or dice it, it's not good. And the thing that is kind of, the biggest concern for me is it almost feels like there's a disconnect in the locker room when you hear that Minkah Fitzpatrick quote, when you see guys like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens lashing out at different points throughout the season, when you see frustration from TJ Watt boiling over into the press conference, complaining about, not getting holding calls. And tell me if I'm wrong. It just feels like this is the first time in, at least a while. I want to say maybe going back to, at some point during the Big Ben days, where this Steelers team, it just feels like they don't really have a culture set this year.
Yeah. It's not a very healthy culture right now as things stand. And you pointed out some of the sideline stuff, the press conferences and all that. And that all is, I feel like, kind of added up, and it kind of came out they played literally 2 games in 5 days. So, and that only and the fact that they lost to those teams too in such poor fashion just amplifies it, makes it that much worse. And then I'm sure you saw this from Big Ben on his podcast, his
Oh yeah,
comments.
I was gonna bring this up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but saying it like there's no one who's gonna grab you by the face mask or whatever. There's like, there's no like it's almost like a lack of leadership in a sense, or also like a lack of um discipline. I mean, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, the first two that come to mind, especially with their tantrums throughout the season. It's just like, where's the accountability? Where's the, you know, typical like Steeler football? He even said it's like it's like not even there, and it's like non-existent. So it's just I don't. I mean, part of that also comes down to head coach, but the
Yeah,
players
no,
ultimately are the ones who really kind of establish that culture. But um,
it does, and I'm a Tomlin guy, man. I've always been a Tomlin guy. I think he's one of the top 5 coaches in the league. But this is kind of part of the risk you play with coaches who are players coaches, is that sometimes there can kind of be that lack of discipline. So while yes, Mike Tomlin's always had this culture in place, it's like this is really the first time that it's really been tested, where there were expectations coming into this year without a Ben Roethlisberger led team under Mike Tomlin. 2 years ago it was well, actually, I guess it was really more last year. It was all right. Well, let's see what the team can do with a rookie quarterback with Mitch Trubisky at the helm. The last time Ben Roethlisberger wasn't there, the expectations were zilch when it was Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges that were at the
yeah,
quarterback position. So this is really the first year where the team has had expectations, playoff expectations, um, without under Mike Tomlin's head coaching, without Ben Roethlisberger at the quarterback position. So and it's not a pretty product right now of what we've seen the past 2 weeks. And winning kind of masks everything, but when you're not winning, it really comes out and does not look good. So yeah, I mean, it's a decent chunk of this has to fall on Mike Tomlin. The fact that he's been letting these internal issues become external issues.
right.
And I think the part of that is just you're seeing a divide in the locker room. You're seeing players not fully buy into what the Steelers are doing this year.
But that's also on the players too. Like that's I mean, like you literally just said, Mike Tomlin's like a player's coach. He's always had this sort of culture established since he's been there in his entire tenure. And yet here we have players who, for some reason, aren't buying in or are just kind of in their own little world, kind of doing what they want or just kind of getting away with stuff a little bit too. But it's just it's all added up, man. It's just I don't know where the Steelers go from. I mean, obviously there's still 4 games to play, but um, it's hard to point. I mean, you can point fingers all you want, but it's just like, what does that do ultimately? Like, I don't. There's no like solution to this really. You can't just like go out and fire people. Like, there's no like bench people. I don't, because you're still in contention for the playoffs. Like somehow you got to right the ship, and I
Yeah.
don't really know how that's gonna happen, but
And I mean, as far as the players aspect, I feel like something that I've heard before from coaches say is like when your best when your best players are your hardest workers or your best leaders, that's when you kind of have the best teams, because everybody just kind of follows them. I mean, I
yeah,
think about like always hearing stories of Troy Polamalu. He was the hardest
mhm,
worker, put his head down, was always spending the most time in film study, and he was the best player on those Steelers defenses, and kind of led the way in that sense. Ben Roethlisberger definitely was not the hardest player, but he was the best, and he could command a locker room with, and kind of hold that level of respect. When you've got Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky not being able to throw touchdown passes, there's nobody that's really leading that offense. For as hard a worker as TJ Watt is, I don't know the kind of leader that he necessarily is.
right,
Cam Hayward's a great leader. He can't do it on his own.
mhm,
So it's just tough. And you wonder, and maybe this is where that conflict came from Deontay Johnson and Minkah Fitzpatrick a few weeks ago, is you have these kind of guys on defense that have these leadership roles like a Minkah Fitzpatrick or a Cameron Hayward. But, the offensive guys, there's a disconnect between the offense and defense at times. It's hard to really argue that. And, it just, you wonder, who's kind of the offensive leader of that group. You've got a lot of young wide receiver and skill position players. We talked, there's really nobody established at the quarterback position. And, as far as the offensive line goes, I think the longest tenured player on that O-line was probably Chuks Okorafor before he got benched. So there's really a lack of leadership. And then you go through the coordinator change as well. That could be one of the biggest issues for the offense as far as just kind of, leadership and having all your ducks in a row, so to speak.
Right. It's there's no real leader right now. And Pickett getting injured didn't really help. So
yeah. And you know what? Here's the thing that's frustrating too, is you've seen the traits in him, man. Like, I fully believe that he could be the leader of that locker room, the leader of that huddle. But, part of it is you also have to perform. It's hard to be that leader when you're also not performing. And when you're injured, there's no way to make that happen. And it's not like he was, lighting it up before he got injured either. So it is a tough spot, man. But like you said, they've still got a shot to make the playoffs here. So something's going to have to come together. We'll preview the Colts game in a little bit. Just a couple things from this game. It was a long time ago, so I don't really want to, overly analyze it. But, the defense struggled in the first half. I said this could be an issue. They had no answer for the tight end, Hunter Henry. Yep. McCall Walker got burned. He's got to see less time on the field because that's just not working. And the Steelers offense, they really couldn't get much going. They were down big at halftime. And then the defense pitched a shutout for them in the second half to try to give them a shot to get back in it. And I think they could only muster 8 points. So, that just wasn't going to be enough. And the Steelers were only 3 of 14 on third down. So like a broken record. Again, that was an issue. And both of these teams had a one turnover in the game. The Patriots capitalized on theirs. The Steelers didn't on theirs. Tomlin even said, that was part of the difference. And, I believe that as well. And, lo and behold, it results in a 3-point loss.
Yeah, it was ugly again. The score definitely made it seem closer than it actually was. 21 points the first half. That's just poor all around. Like McCall Walker, I don't know, who else do you have in the linebacker? Because the injuries are just ridiculous.
I don't know, man.
That's Landon Roberts
about it. Blake Martinez played a decent amount of snaps, man. That's something that I was kind of wondering today when I was actually looking at the snap counts was, hey, now that Martinez is gonna have another 10 days from Thursday night to this Saturday's game or whatever it is, maybe he's gonna become more in the fold. But again, it's not like you're going to be able to, fully rely on him. It's a tough spot, man. Yeah. But that also comes down to coaching. You got to be able to find a way to scheme around your weaknesses. And they've been getting exploited by better coaches who are able to get their tight ends more into the fold and exploit that matchup.
Yeah, I feel like that was the matchup we were even talking about coming into the game. It was just the tight ends, the middle of the field, and
100%. Because and now it's back-to-back weeks of Trey McBride on the Cardinals and Hunter Henry on the Patriots. Both, I believe, were the leading receivers in each of those two games. So that's a problem. I'll talk about it a little bit in the Colts game too. But outside of that, that's pretty much all I have. Trubisky wasn't good. He's going to get a stock down from me later. But that's nothing shocking. He's not a viable option at quarterback in the NFL. It's point blank at this stage. So the Steelers lose this one, back-to-back losses. It's grim for the Steelers at this point, but there's still a shot at the playoffs. So we'll preview their game against the Colts, which could be, the biggest game of the season for them a little bit later. We'll talk about that one, but let's flip things over and talk about the Eagles. Really bad blowout loss to the Cowboys. You even texted me, I think at halftime, saying man, if they don't pick it up at the start of the third, I may have to check out of this one a little early.
And that's exactly what I did because AJ Brown fumbled, and I'm glad I didn't stay up to see the Jalen Carter fumble return touchdown, because then I would have kept watching. And
that's what kept me in it, dude. I saw that and I was like, all right, maybe I can stay and watch this and see what happens a little bit more. But I shouldn't have.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I turned it off when I did because I didn't want false hope. But it was just, I don't really know where to begin other than, the fumbles, I guess, it was a huge reason the Eagles lost. Fumbled 3 times, and they were especially backbreakers because all 3 of them, they were driving. It's not like they were in their own territory, but and they could have had points on at least 3 points on each of those. And and of course they just losing the handle of the ball, and it just like uh, they just, especially after the first one, Jalen Hurts fumbling and getting stripped or whatever. But that was, I mean, that was at least 3 points. That was at least to respond to the touchdown drive the Cowboys had. And instead, it was 7-0. The Cowboys drove down the field, kicked a field goal, made it 10, and it just felt like it kept adding. They kept adding on each and every drive because the defense is also a huge issue. They can't seem to stop anyone. And the last three games, I mean, that's the Bills, Niners, and the Cowboys. They've allowed 62% conversion on third down. That's horrific. That's just horrible. Like,
Yeah.
you can't get off the field. You can't make the plays to get
And
off
dude,
the field.
like we've talked about this, man. Like it just felt like every time there was a big stop to be made, they couldn't get off the field, and
Yeah.
that's been an issue for them. Yeah, like you said, the last couple of weeks of just like, you know, they just can't get the big play when they need it on defense, and not even a big play like a turnover, just to get off the field.
Yeah, man. It was just more of the same from the last few weeks. And yeah, I used to be, I kind of preached Sean Desai earlier in the season, but when it comes against, these top teams, these teams that are, around your level, if not better than you, like it's just really, really disappointing. And you can blame, I don't know, all sorts of things. You can blame the injuries that have occurred, but they're relatively healthy now. Reed Blankenship sure went out with an injury, but Sidney Brown filled in well. But even still, it's like I feel like they're just slow. They're just a step slow, and maybe that's partly because of all the snaps they've been taking on defense, and
Yeah.
the offense not really helping out. So it kind of just goes in conjunction. They kind of go together, and it's really just frustrating to see that the offense, while they do, I mean, they put up like 172 yards of offense, and yet only had, what was it, like 3 points, 6 points or whatever at the half. Like they just couldn't punch it in, and then the fumbles, like it just
And
all
that's another thing we've talked about repeatedly with the Eagles is just being able to capitalize more when they have the opportunities to get into the end zone. And they just, haven't been able to do that, especially recently. Now, real quick, going back to the defense, another thing I want to ask you, because you talked about some of the other things that could be factors being on the field for such an extended amount of time, players just being tired from those snaps. One other thing, do you think it could at all possibly be the fact that we did talk about how like they played a ton of snaps against the Bills. Then they had to turn around and play the 49ers while the 49ers had the extra rest. And then all of a sudden, bam, another big rivalry game against the Cowboys. Like it's a lot of high stakes games in a short amount of times versus, now they're going to have a little bit of extra rest because they're playing on Monday this week. But do you think there's anything to that fact of just like a lot of games in a short amount of time when you're also playing a ton of snaps against really good offenses?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And I think what also has made it worse is the lack of the front four rotation. I mean, I feel like it's been Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, playing like at least 75% of the snaps. Like that's an absurd amount. Like they should be getting Nolan Smith in there a bit more. He's actually shown more
Yeah,
promise as the season has come along. So I mean,
100%.
it's just man, just I don't know. They're just not playing as a unit either. And it's just like when the front four is not getting there, and they're right now, I think 11th in pass rush or in pressure rate or something like that, which is way lower than what they were earlier in the season. I just think it's, yeah, the
And
number
even
of,
way lower compared to where they were last year. This is something I was actually thinking about during the game because last year they were setting, all-time sack number, like, at an all-time record pace at points in the season last year for sacks. And I think that maybe helped the secondary a lot more than we've really led on to is the
yes.
fact that they're just not getting to the quarterback at the same rate that they were last year. And I think that's exposing the secondary a bit more and resulting in these teams being able to stay on the field longer against this defense.
Yeah, and then like James Bradbury, I feel like he's fallen off. He's just like slowed down a bit. I think it's interesting because Darius Slay's older by like a few years, but he's still moving well. But James Bradbury, on the other hand, I feel like it's, even though he's still only 30, I feel like the age is starting to catch up to him a lot faster than it is with Darius Slay. But yeah, but you're right. I feel like the pass rush last year definitely kind of covered up and masked the secondaries. Not that they were bad, but like at least they bailed them out on several occasions, but now it's not the case. It's like now the pass rush isn't working, it isn't as effective, and the blitzes. I mean, I just don't even get me started with that. They never work. They're just not effective. It's just um, altogether play calling, scheming, the players, the personnel that's put in on certain downs. It's like it's all just not working. There's no identity here. They don't force turnovers. They don't get stops on third down. Like they are struggling to get sacks now. So like, what do you turn to in this case? Your rush defense, you're still getting out muscled by offensive lines now. Granted, it's still facing some of the better offensive lines in the league the last few weeks, but it's just you can't rely on anything on defense right now. Like, like somebody, I think it was Shannon Sharp who said, like, they can't even stop a parked car. Like, it's that bad. Like,
That's a really good line.
yeah, I was on first take. It was literally like Monday, and I was like, wow, that's a great line. I don't remember that, but it was either him or Stephen A. Smith that said that. But I was like, that sums it up so well. They just can't stop anything right now. But I'm really worried about this unit. Even though it gets easier, maybe like it'll get better, but it's just been brutal the last few weeks defensively. But
And this
yeah,
is what's tough about it too, is every week we've talked about the things they need to do better and they don't do them better. You
no,
know? That like nothing is improving, the scheme is not changing, the results are still the same. And it's like eventually push is gonna have to come here soon, man. There's 4 games left in the season before it's really gonna be all said and done. So like it's go time now, man.
yeah, it's time to play your best football now. Like you got to
Yeah.
turn it around. This is 4 games to get it right, essentially. So, um, I mean, I'm
Luckily for them, they
still
do have 2 against the Giants and 1 against the Seahawks, but, I mean, that's not even necessarily gimmies anymore because, Tommy DeVito's almost given a little hey, dude, as much of a joke as it may be and as funny as it may be, I mean, like, players rally around stuff like that, you know?
yeah, yeah.
A young quarterback, undrafted player playing in his home state, winning football games. That
Yeah,
don't take. I mean, the defense is gonna, the defense, the offensive line, they're gonna put a little more heart into it than maybe they would have prior to that.
yeah. It's so fascinating how this is all kind of shaking out. But yeah, I'm not going to say they're pushovers anymore, especially with how they're playing right now offensively. 3 straight wins for them, but and then the Cardinals in the middle, Jonathan Gann revenge game, whatever you want to call it. But it's yeah, they're not gimmies. They're you certainly can't overlook them now. So I mean that's really all I have to say. The only positive from this is the Eagles still have control of the NFC East. So if they win out and the Cowboys win out, it doesn't matter. The Eagles will take the division, but seems like a tough ask as things stand. But
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely gonna be something to keep an eye on. I mean, another loss for the Eagles at some point this season isn't completely out of the cards. One last thing I want to ask you though,
yeah,
before we move on to stock up, stock down. You talked about the job of the defensive scheming, and we talked about the offense not being able to get into the end zone. When does some of this blame start to fall on Nick Sirianni? Because that's the point I'm starting to get to a little bit. Is he can have the big personality, he can be loved by the city of Philadelphia, but like for me as more of like an outside observer at it, like all right, man. Like, he also gives a lot of the sort of like players, coaches mentality, kind of in that
yeah,
same vein as Tomlin, where it's like, you got to kind of get this ship back righted and back heading in the right direction because, yeah, sure, you beat the Chiefs, you barely got past the Bills, but like those are 2 really bad losses against 2 of the arguably best teams in the NFC that you're gonna face again at some point this season.
yeah. I mean, it certainly starts with Sirianni. I mean, it's always. I feel like I've said this last 2 weeks too. The last 2 losses, they've been out coached. Offensively, defensively, like they've just been outmatched. Like, and I know Sirianni's an offensive minded guy, but like still, it's just some of his. I feel like he's lacked aggression like recently, or some questionable fourth down calls that he's made in the past 2 weeks that maybe he shouldn't have done or like shouldn't have gone for it. I think the Niners last week, I think they were down 2 scores, and instead of it was like a 4th and 2, and they elected to punt. But I was like, usually he would go for that. I don't know. It certainly starts with Sirianni. He definitely deserves some blame for this, and um, you can say all you want about, oh, we're gonna like bounce back, it was a bad loss, whatever, but like you show it on the field. Like the players got to show it. It's like they got to rally and just put it on the field. Like at this point, you got to take your frustration out from the last 2 weeks. Like um, if they don't respond like they should and how I think they should, then like that comes down to Sirianni ultimately. But I don't
Okay.
know. It's tough. It's tough.
One other thing I got to ask you, because this just kind of came to my mind again, and it was a story a little bit. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. What'd you make of the Jalen Carter crying on the sideline?
Oh right. I forgot that happened. I mean that was. Listen, I'm not gonna like hate on him necessarily for that, but like obviously, really passionate player, and the mistake he made before that, which kind of led up to him kind of crying and stuff. It's like he's a rookie, like and I'm not gonna like totally like roast him for
Yeah.
some of the mistakes he's made, but I don't know. I feel like that's also a lot of that was frustration. I feel like, especially in that Niners game, I believe it was when that happened. But
Oh, was
um,
that the Niners game? I don't know why I
I
thought it was
believe
the.
it was. Yeah, we
Okay.
didn't even talk about it though last week, but
Yeah.
um,
I don't know why that just came to my mind now. I mean, my take on it real quick. I mean, I'm not going to blame the guy for being passionate. I actually, like to see that, and there's a reason they say, when when you have a passion for the game, it's blood, sweat, and tears. It's not just blood
yeah,
and sweat. So I think there's
yeah,
something to that. And I mean, we've never really talked about this, but both of us were athletes at different points. I mean, there's
yeah,
been instances where I've been moved to tears, whether it was,
yeah,
joy or sadness, out there on the field. I mean, it's happened in both situations. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, I'm not going to rip the guy for that. And yeah, I mean, we could get into a whole diatribe about that with different instances it's happened in pro sports before, but it's not even worth it at this point because it was, 2 weeks ago. I don't know why I thought it was against the Cowboys for whatever reason, but
No, it was last week, but no, it shows he cares. Like he just
yeah.
trying to do his best and wants the team to succeed. Clearly, that's how that's why it all came out. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
100%. So let's let's keep this train rolling along because we're a little bit shorter on time today. Just had to kind of cram this episode in, but let's go to stock up, stock down. I'll start first with the Steelers. My one stock up. We talked about the inside linebacker position. The one guy that needs a lot of credit is a Landon Roberts, man.
yeah,
He played through a groin injury. I believe he played every single defensive snap, a groin injury that they weren't even sure he was going to be able to suit up and play this week.
yeah,
And he had 6 tackles and 1 sack in the game. He knows how important it is that he steps up for this defense without Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander. So
yeah,
him being out there and playing through the injury and still putting up the results and kind of expanding his role to also, be a little bit more of a coverage linebacker, which is something he's really never excelled at. But he's kind of putting himself out there to be exposed a little bit, just for to try to help the team in any way he can. So he's grown on me a lot, man. He's become one of my favorite players on this defense, and hopefully this kind of extended week and a half from the Thursday game has allowed him to get healthy because he's going to be very vital for the Steelers team down the stretch.
yeah. Hugely important for them. He's been probably their most consistent player last few weeks, maybe the
Yeah.
whole season, but
Maybe the whole season, man. I mean, he has shown up and played and played with a lot of intensity and fire all season.
yeah,
You haven't had to question, his effort he was putting in. So he was my stock up, and then my 2 stocks down. I talked about Mike Tomlin a little bit, and it's just tough with the culture and everything that we discussed earlier, and just also the fact that it's felt like he's been just out coached the last 2 weeks. Like the other teams
yeah,
have come in ready to go right from the jump, and his team hasn't. So he gets a stock down for me. And then my other one is Mitch Trubisky, man.
yeah,
He's just not in at quarterback. He had 190 yards and an interception. He played somewhat better in the second half, but this team, the defense kept them in it in the second half, pitching a shutout, not letting the Patriots get any more points. And, he wasn't able to get enough to just even tie the game, let alone, get the lead back. And
yeah.
it was tough. He had his opportunities. He made some bad throws. There was that questionable decision to throw it deep on the 4th down towards the end of the
Yes,
game.
yes,
Man, fans were chanting for Mason Rudolph at one point. Dude, I mean, it's just at the point where, like, there's got to be another option out there next year to
yeah.
compete with Kenny Pickett for the job. I'm not even talking about backing up Pickett, but Trubisky's just not a viable option at quarterback in this league.
No, he's not like maybe third string at best. Like he's just not going to give you much as a backup either. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not going to cut it. You don't feel good with him as a backup. I don't feel like, I don't feel confident he can come in and win games. It's more of,
yeah,
if anything, don't lose it.
yeah. Right, right. I agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So that's just three guys for my stock up, stock down this week. Who do you have for stock up, stock down for the Eagles?
Stock up. Maybe this comes as a surprise, but maybe not. I'm giving it to Braden Mann, literally just for the perfectly executed fake punt. And I mean, there's really not much else to say. That's really sad though, that he's the only stock up when it's a punter. It's like you really
Yeah.
can't turn
He
to
was with the
anyone
Steelers. He was with the Steelers back in training camp,
else. Yeah, and you know what? He's been a
It's
good
crazy we're
punter.
still talking about him here in week 14 in a stock up situation.
I know. I never thought I would say that, but he's been actually fairly decent. He's been an upgrade over C plus, who was absolute garbage last
And
year.
and he had a good year last year with the Jets. It was I
But
was a little bit surprised that a team didn't kind of go out and get him right away.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I guess props to him that he stuck around this long, man.
yeah, he's taking that job and by the throat. So, um, yeah, the only positive of that. So, but stock down, Sirianni, you kind of touched on it already.
Yeah.
Outcoached the last 2 weeks too, and I mean, it just seems like there's a lack of identity right now on both sides of the ball. I mean, offensively, they're not running it very much. They're not running it effectively. So, and then when it's the past game, it's like it just seems a little too predictable at times with some of the personnel they run, some of the plays. But I mean, yeah, it ultimately comes down to him, especially on the offensive side. But that's really I could throw the entire defense in this if I wanted to, but just poor all around. Turnovers can't. I mean, it's not good enough. That's really there's no other way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you kind of gave him the stock down, man. I mean, I think that some of it has to start kind of falling on him
Yeah.
because, a lot of the stuff that he does and his mannerisms are not liked by people outside of Philadelphia.
Hmm.
And it's going to start to come and circle back around if they don't, kind of get back to their winning ways. So,
Yeah.
and you wonder how much that could potentially seep into the locker room if it gets to that point. So he's
Right.
got to really get control of the locker room and get this ship righted. So I'm with you giving him the stock down this week.
Yeah. Both their head coaches stock downs. Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems right. It seems fitting,
it
honestly.
seems right. It's tough to do in a week 14 when you're trying to get to playing your best football, but that's
Yeah.
just not where these teams are at the moment.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's move ahead and talk about week 15 and hopefully get some optimism in here. So I'll start with the Steelers. They are playing tomorrow at Indianapolis, Saturday game now that college football is, heading into their bowl season. So, Ricardo, I don't think it's outlandish for me to say that the entire season kind of hangs in the balance this week for the Steelers on this game.
Yeah.
Just the way that they've lost the last 2 weeks, and now to have these questions I've brought up about the culture in the locker room, to have these questions about how much guys are buying in. You start to see the doubt creeping in. Mike Tomlin's got to find a way to rally this group together and get them to realize, like, hey, there's a lot of talent here. We still have a shot to make the postseason, and anything can happen when you get to that point. They have the extra time to prepare from the Thursday, going to back to kind of more of a regular scheduled week, even though it is Saturday. If they can't regroup, kind of reset a little bit, and come out and find a way to get a win against a team in the Colts, who are also a very quality football team, vying for one of those last wild card spots in the AFC. That could kind of be it. I could see the locker
Yeah.
room kind of being shot for the rest of the year. There's just too many other teams that are solid in the AFC still competing for this wild card for them to just let this game, slip away. It's one thing to, obviously some really bad opponents the last 2 weeks, but a team that you're literally going stride for stride for to try to, get the upper hand on and get into the playoffs against. I think you just have to have this game. And if they don't get it this week, I don't care who's on their schedule the rest of the way. They do have a couple more big games against division rivals, but to me, I feel like it's all or nothing on this game at this point.
Yeah, because then the Colts have the tiebreaker over the Steelers, and then it gets really messy. Then you have to rely on other teams to lose. So, you still want to have some control over how this shakes out, and Yeah, you're right. I feel like this is kind of make or break. So it's you have to win. There's really no other way to put it. Like it's just that important for two contending or at least two potential wild card teams um fighting it out on tomorrow. So it's like you just gotta get back to the Steeler way somehow, like running the ball or something, because that's what the Colts are, not good at handling. So take it out of Trubisky's hands, man. Like just rely on the run, like Najee and Jalen
Well,
Warren, man.
that's what I was going to get into with kind of my keys to the game here is, on offense, I think you really do just have to pound the rock and rely on that run game. I mean, the Colts are kind of meh. They're middle of the pack on defense. They are slightly better against the pass than they are against the run.
Yeah,
They're a bottom 10 team against the run, and they allow the fourth most points per game. So,
yeah,
not that that says much. I mean, the Steelers lost to the Cardinals, who allow the second most points per game.
yeah,
So, you can't hang your hat on that and feel real confident about it. But I think that's kind of like you said, they're not turning to Trubisky and saying, "Hey, go make plays for us." At this
yeah,
point, it's don't lose the game for us. Don't throw the ball away and put us in a worse situation than they already are. It's going to
yeah,
be predictable what this team does on offense, but if they can punch it into the end zone once or twice and hold the Colts to a certain extent, and maybe get a couple field goals on the board as well. That I think is going to kind of be the key, and just kind of play a little bit of the possession game. Win the time of possession battle, maybe win the turnover battle as well. But I think on offense, you really got to run the ball. And then when it comes to the defensive side of things, a couple notes just to be aware of is that Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, both of them, it looks like they're going to play, which is good. And it seems like Blake Freeland, rookie right tackle for the Colts, may be starting this week because I think they have an injury to I forget who it
Is it
was.
Braden
It's
Smith?
Braden
Yeah,
Smith who's been dealing with an injury.
yeah,
So I don't know if he's going to be healthy. I don't know what the latest update on that is, but I feel like we've talked about this at different times. TJ Watt's having a really good year. We'll see if he can take advantage of this matchup.
yeah,
And Jonathan Taylor is also trending towards not playing. So,
yeah,
that's kind of what I was most concerned about was the Colts really establishing a ground game kind of the other way. So if the Steelers can kind of keep the ground game hemmed in, make Gardner Minshew go out there and beat you. I think that's got to kind of be the strategy.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean that they're a run first team anyway, so
Yeah.
and they're not really a kind of team that's going to ask Minshew to make all these plays. But um, you know what? If it comes down to Minshew versus Trubisky, I mean that'll be really really interesting how that shakes out. I mean that could be a bad
Yeah.
game, but if the run game is limited by the Steelers, then they'll have a better time getting to him too, pass rush wise, and make it third and long situation. Don't give him easy third down conversion. Don't give him third and shorts. Like that's such a huge part of it. So
The
yeah,
thing that
just
also makes me feel good is the fact that like they don't really have like a tight end that you're like as concerned about necessarily.
yeah,
Like there were clear dominant receiving threats at tight end the past 2 weeks against Trey McBride and Hunter Henry. There's really no standout guy in Indianapolis. I mean,
yeah,
Mo Alley Cox is more of a vertical threat, but you're not game planning necessarily around Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree. So
yeah.
there's nothing. I mean, like no disrespect to them, but it's not quite on the same level of a receiving threat that can really go for 8 catches and 90 yards the way some of these other guys have the last couple weeks.
Yeah, they're just more like physical. They're kind of like bigger tight ends. They're not really threats in the pass game, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
still
I mean, that's the area the teams have been able to expose. So,
yeah,
hopefully the Steelers can kind of manage that because you're going up against lesser talent at that position. And now you've seen a couple weeks, getting out coached there. I'd hope they can kind of put a game plan in place to try to limit that. So,
yeah,
yeah, that's kind of my keys to this game, man. We'll get into the predictions after we preview the Eagles game a little bit, but just such a huge game, man, because if they lose 3 in a row, and this one against a team that's also just clawing for a playoff spot, man, the locker room may really start to seriously fracture.
Oh boy, I can't even imagine how that would work. But yeah, it's you're playing. The Seahawks aren't at the level of the Niners, the Cowboys. Like their defense is not very good. It's actually ranked 27th in the league. They're 25th against the pass and allow the eighth highest completion percentage. There are all these numbers that they're in the bottom half. So to me, offensively, it's like have your way with them. Like seriously, it's like you haven't had a full. I mean, the entire season really. You haven't had like a good, like solid full 4 quarters of good football offensively. And I mean, I'm not going to say that this is a get right game, but this is as close as it comes to that.
I
So
suppose, man. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just like this is what I'm going to keep saying too. Like, run the ball. Like, seriously, like you can't be so reliant on the pass. Like, you got to mix it up, especially. I mean, the play action never works because you don't run the ball. So it's so that makes the offense that much more predictable, one dimensional. So you really, really got to like, I don't know, have a balanced attack in this game, and especially in Seattle where it's like one of the loudest crowds, the loudest environments, and in the NFL, maybe all the sports, like you want to take them out of it, like long drives, mix in pass and run, like seriously, like, and also that gives your defense a break, like, and in the red zone, they're not good either. So when you're there, punch it in, like seriously, you just take out all your frustration from the last few weeks offensively, and just really unleash it on the Seahawks. Like, I mean, they have some quality like players in the secondary, but it just as a unit they haven't played well together. So seriously, like you have all the weapons in the world. You outmatch them in so many different aspects. So if you don't put up at least like I don't know 25 points, I think that's and you don't win the game. Like that's a disappointment because they're not good. They're just not. So I'm not cutting them any slack on this game. So
Yeah.
um, and you can't turn the ball over. That's also huge. You can't turn it over like you have been in recent weeks. So
You
um,
shouldn't, man. I mean, the Seahawks have been reeling a little bit. They've been struggling really, really. It feels like the last,
6 weeks or
I
so.
was gonna say the last 5 to 6 weeks they've been kind of reeling a little bit.
Yeah,
You know, maybe they come in with a little bit of desperation because at this point, like their season's really on the line. Like every game is gonna matter as to whether they can claw their way back to a playoff spot. But
yeah,
I think that for the Eagles, it's like you got to take advantage and I like the way that you said it off the top. Get right against a team that is just reeling right now.
yeah. I mean, seriously, like you have to, and then defensively, like really, the only threat is the wide receivers, and they don't run the ball very well. And Gino might not even play. Geno Smith might miss another game with his groin injury. So if you lose to Drew Lock and the Seahawks, a backup quarterback,
You
that
can't
is
have that.
alarming. It cannot happen. Like, like defend, like get off the field on third down, put them in third and long situations. Like, man, seriously, it's like I don't know. Maybe you have to double DK Metcalf or maybe Tyler Lockett, but the receivers are really the only threat offensively. And the offensive line has been underwhelming all season too. So, um, again, on paper, they should have the advantage. Um, but I guess we'll see what happens. But you have to win this game. You see, like there's no other way to put it. You have the matchup on both sides. You have the advantage on both sides of the ball. So yeah, there's not much more to say on that.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily have any like big thoughts to add on to that. I mean, I think it's one of those games where it's like you don't even want to think about the possibility of losing and
Yeah,
what that would be such a just brutal frame of mind to put yourself in because then you're really questioning, are these even really Super Bowl contenders at that point?
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
this is a game that you gotta go out there and take care of business. And I know that the home crowd in Seattle is going to be a factor, but they're the better football team on paper, man. They got to go out and show it. And yeah, the thought of losing to Drew Lock potentially and a one-dimensional football team, and really a defense that struggled and a team that struggled for the last 5-6 weeks. There's no excuses here. They need to right the ship.
Yep, yep, exactly. So
All right, man. Let's get into the predictions a little bit. So last week, the Eagles, obviously we're plus 3.5 against the Cowboys, lost 33-13. Both of us had the Cowboys winning. You had the Cowboys covering the spread. I did not. As for
yeah,
the Steelers, both of us had the Steelers winning. They did not, but we each had the Patriots covering the spread, which the Patriots did, obviously, winning the game. This week, let's start with the Steelers. Pittsburgh plus 1.5 at Indianapolis. I mean, I think the line is very valid. I mean, Indianapolis has, found a way to win games all throughout the year. That being said, man, I mean, this is, like I said, this is kind of like do or die time for Pittsburgh. So I'm going to have them winning. I'll have them cover the spread because why not? And I'm going to make it just a 2-point spread. Let's do 16-14 Steelers win.
Wow, low scoring.
Low scoring.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say, oh man,
I was between 16 and 14 or 18 to 16, so I decided to go with the lower number here.
Fair enough. Yeah. I feel like this could have more points than what you just said. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna do this to you. I'm sorry I have to, but I'm picking the Colts. And I'm gonna say 23-17. So they cover the spread. I just think. If it really comes down to Gardner Minshew or Trubisky, I'm taking Minshew.
It's valid, man. It's valid. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, if that's how it ultimately ends up going, man. I mean, it's gonna be tough times for the Steelers. Looking ahead towards the rest of the season. But dude, I mean, if I had my bias out of it, the Colts is probably the better bet here.
Yeah, I would say
they're a team that's gunning for a playoff spot. They've had success the last couple weeks. The Steelers are really reeling. So let's get into this Eagles game now. Philadelphia -3 favorites at Seattle. What do you make of the game? What do you make of the line and your prediction?
I mean, I would. Yeah, I'm going to say the Eagles cover the spread. So I'm going to say, for once, I'm picking them to cover the spread, but they have to get it right this time. So I'm going to say 27-23, Eagles win. And I feel like that's, yeah. I like that. I don't
have a problem with it. I'm going to go 24-20 Eagles. I also have them covering, dude. I mean, they can't lose this game.
Yeah.
And I think that they're going to have their way a little bit. I think they're going to cover the spread. How much they do so, I don't know, but I do think that they're good enough to cover the 3 points. So 24-20, I am going to have them winning and getting the job done up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, man. Oh, man.
All right, bro. Some big games this week for both of these teams for sure. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Let's, again, hope for a more positive episode this coming week. So
I've been doing a lot of hoping, and it hasn't done much good, Ricardo, but we'll see. This is our last episode. No, we will have one more episode before the holidays, the Christmas holiday and everything. Yeah. So, let's get that Christmas shopping in, Ricardo. Both of us got some work to do in that aspect.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, sounds good, dude. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.